This blockchain continuing education program is brought to you by our major sponsors: HTMLCoin, utility coin beyond the hype; Althash University, your online school in the fourth industrial revolution; Libra Codes, take control on your NFT creation; and Credence Hub, verified credentials, anytime, anywhere. We also would like to thank our partners.
Hello, good morning. Today is a very special day. We have a great speaker, and our subject matter expert is Noel. This segment today is for continuing blockchain education. So students who are taking courses in the blockchain studies are required to listen and give critical reflection on our segment today. Our topic for today is very important because it is the bedrock of blockchain technology. So we will be discussing the importance of consensus mechanism, and that will be led by Noel. And also we will be joined by Professor Johannes Dowe from Germany. So I'm gonna call Noel over here, our subject matter expert, and also adding to the screen, Professor Johannes Dowe. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So, Mike,
good.
we have your article and we will be distributing it to our viewers in the description in today's interview and for our blockchain continuing education.
You have my article?
Yes, in LinkedIn.
Which one? Oh, in LinkedIn. Which one is it? Oh, on consensus?
Right. It says what are consensus algorithm, and the title is "Are consensus algorithms important?" That's the topic.
Yeah, no one pays any attention to that anymore. I mean, you're going to have two readers on that.
Right.
It's the most important. It's the most important thing, right? This is the thing. Consensus algorithms are at the heart of what we do in distributed ledger technology. They're in the heart of the smart contracts we put together. They're in the heart of the workflows, and no one pays any attention to them.
Correct. So, any opinion why is that?
It's in my opinion, it's the proverbial head in the sand. They don't want to pay attention to consensus. It's interesting. So blockchain is something that has changed the trajectory of mankind because it did a certain thing. It solved the Byzantine generals' problem, right? It's a Byzantine fault tolerant system. Blockchain is, and it does it through consensus. But consensus can determine how Byzantine fault tolerant it is. In other words, if EOS wanted to change the data that is on the DLT is supposed to be immutable and unhackable, but we all know that EOS has changed data. Everyone has changed data. Ethereum has changed data once, right, for the Dowe hack. So if it's not immutable and it's not unhackable, then how much good is it? Where should we use it in our workflows? Where is it appropriate? And more importantly, which no one is paying any attention to, is where is it not applicable? Where should you not be using this type of consensus algorithm, right? Should you be using a private consensus algorithm to conduct a real estate transaction for a $500,000 home? I probably think not. A private consensus algorithm can be changed by either player. So at that point, Byzantine fault tolerance doesn't exist within that system.
Right. And by the way, going back to your article, you made mention about three types of consensus algorithm. So you have mentioned about the private, community, and public. You classify them into three. So for our freshmen studying blockchain studies, would you kindly clarify what is a private consensus, community consensus, and public consensus, please?
It's a shame they don't teach this, but I don't believe they do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like you almost had to be there for the gestation in order to really appreciate what consensus is, because we were building consensus, so we were actually looking at consensus. Now it's just a part of the fabric. But I think as we enter into the metaverse and we begin to put together contracts that are seamless and frictionless, I think that the consensus algorithms that we use are going to become a lot more important. People are going to have to pay attention to consensus. So there is a private consensus algorithm, and that is a consensus algorithm that's put together on a chain that basically it might, sometimes we do them on a server. So there's two users at that point, and your consensus algorithm, we don't need people to mine and guess a number, and spend thousands of dollars to record a block if it is a transaction between two people that absolutely trust one another. That kind of thing is like if you have someone, actually the best example of that is the current Swift network. Swift network clears transactions from banking, does it in about 3 days, and it's very expensive compared to blockchain technology. But it's a consensus algorithm. It's a private consensus algorithm. The people that are in there, and I'm not saying Swift is a digital currency. It's not, but it's a platform, and a platform has a private algorithm as far as its security and its consensus. There's all kinds of chains out there that have a private consensus algorithm. It's the easiest that there is to do. We really don't care about nefarious characters coming in and seeing our data streams. It's just a data stream that's just for us. It's more or less a clearinghouse. We look at it. We may use an oracle to look at it, and at the end of the day, do a single clearing. That kind of a thing. So private consensus algorithms are something that can be put up ad hoc. They're only between two people. There's not a whole lot of trust that needs to be manufactured in the platform, because the trust already exists between the two parties and there's no one else. That's a private consensus algorithm. They're a dime a dozen, and most of the people that said, look, I wrote my own blockchain, they did it on a private consensus algorithm, because there's no proof of stake, there's no proof of work, there's all kinds of ways we can do consensus, but on a private, you just don't take it. The next one up is a community consensus, or like I consider like EOS, early EOS, more or less a community consensus algorithm. There's a group of 20, and people argue this to the nth degree, mostly because they have a dog in the hunt. But
what do you mean by that?
Yeah. What do I mean? A dog in the hunt? Most of the people that argue that this platform is a superior platform argue it because they have a substantial stake in that platform.
Yes.
So just be aware, right? I don't have, I keep myself flushed. I don't own any tokens at this point. I'm not involved in speculation, and I'm more involved in the actual working of tokens and building out platforms, as opposed to, the tokenomics that most of people are coming into at this point. So, but for me, the community algorithms are like EOS, right? And the EOS is going to say, well, you're going to have plenty of comments. Yeah, EOS is we're this, we're that, we're one or the other. Yeah, but there's 27 people that sit on a committee and decide whether or not a block should be changed. The bottom line is, and there's other consensus algorithms out there like that. I mean, goodness sakes, I must have read, at probably 300 or 400 white papers at one point on ICO talking about this kind of stuff, right? And they'll all make a grand claim about something, but at the end of the day, it's an algorithm. And what's your algorithm? Let's look at the algorithm, because the algorithm's not going to lie. And is it Byzantine fault tolerant? It's not Byzantine fault tolerant if 27 people can come together in a committee and decide that it's not A, it's B. That's not Byzantine fault tolerant. So in the way that EOS executes on a blockchain, it's not Byzantine fault tolerant. So I would say that that's a community algorithm. Plenty of workflows, I mean, there's tons of work out there, tons of workflows out there that should be on these types of community algorithms, right? And they should be, in the most part, platforms as we're moving forward. If you have if you guys out there are building a metaverse and it doesn't have a purpose or a place, it's just a video game, right? If it doesn't have a purpose and a place, and if that purpose and a place doesn't have like some type of blockchain implementation, some sort of digitization of an NFT to make it purposeful. I mean, there's 1,000 different ways to do that workflow, but you can keep them in a community at this point if your workflow and your platform and you have a community consensus algorithm. I would say a good example of a community consensus algorithm would be like healthcare, that kind of stuff, right? It's a patient provider payee kind of environment, and yes, we want to make sure that the patient is getting the right treatment in the right setting, and that is the patient that's getting. I mean, we need proof of proximity for patients, right? Proof of proximity. I mean, are we giving this patient? Is this the patient we're giving this drug to intravenously, right? If we have proof of proximity, we understand that there's only one patient with that ID, and that one patient is presenting here and nowhere else in the system. So that takes care of our Byzantine fault tolerance in a lot of cases in these types of community systems where we have community consensus algorithms, but we also have proof of proximity or proof of location or a limited environment that we're working in. So these types of consensus algorithms are very inexpensive, and I think at one time had great value. I think as the technology progresses, the community and the private algorithms are becoming less and less useful because there's public algorithms, and a public algorithm is something that is immutable and unhackable. Public algorithm would be, an example would be Bitcoin, the Bitcoin algorithm, proof of stake, Ethereum, proof of work, Ethereum, those types of things. Those have proven to be fairly robust over time, although they've both been gamed. I don't think they're going to be gamed again. And I think that the cost of forking Ethereum or changing back Ethereum is going to be way more than the value in making that edit in the chain. So I don't think that's going to happen. So I would consider the current proof of stake and most of the proof of work as good public algorithms. I don't consider Bitcoin and the Lightning Network as much. And you're going to get a bunch of comments there as well. But there you go. So there's the three consensus algorithms.
Right. Okay, Professor Johannes Dowe, do you have any questions for our subject matter expert?
Yeah, I fully agree in these ways. I would like to just add another detail there, as it's not just the consensus alone. It's the public documentation usually, because even if a committee decides to change something, the use of the tool of a blockchain makes this visible, no matter how this consensus is out of 27 people or so. So it gives a way of security, not in the probably a vocabulary name security as a security, but gives a safe environment, let's say, to recover.
I call that truth,
happened.
right?
Yeah.
It gives
Right,
truth, right? Yep. Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I mean, it gives truth there, as opposed to there is two transactions in that, and there was a fork, but at least we recorded the truth. So we understand that there was a fork. Don't don't tell the DAO, because the DAO was on a fork that didn't succeed on the Ethereum fork, right? So the DAO doesn't have value, because the value followed the other fork. But at least there's truth, and that's part of consensus. Is it becomes the truth machine. I think that's something that corporations are afraid of, is truth, right?
In a way, yes, but I think in the long run, probably not. Because if too many things just run wild, especially in a world of getting more and more information, where no individual can have an oversight of this, such a tool is really something great, even though it has details not wanted by everybody. But I think a community's consensus just in having something to align, let's call it a truth or a meta-truth, will give a social consensus. And this is what we more or less want to adopt all this stuff to.
Yeah.
To communities. So I think this is a really important part of means of addition to the technical consensus.
Consensus has very, very different meanings, I guess, to depending upon where you're at in the process, obviously. But consensus outside of the algorithms, I mean, we're setting up workflows here in DLT, and we're not paying attention to the consensus because of the inconvenient truths around truth sometimes. That's the point.
Absolutely agree with that one.
Sometimes it's an inconvenient truth, and it's said that there are corporations that will not exist in truth if really people understood what they were doing and how they were doing it. These community consensus algorithms can hide stuff too, can obfuscate stuff, because if you're not part of the community, you're not privy to that data stream. So community consensus, it's when you start talking into nefarious characters and you want to start thinking about the structure, it's important to start thinking about your consensus algorithm. If you want to obfuscate something, then you're probably going to want to use a community consensus, which is going to become less and less useful over time. I mean, Solana is, I know Solana's having some difficulties, and Polygon Network is having, some successes, but at this point, it really doesn't matter. We're doing what we wanted to do on ETH in 2017. Basically, we're just not doing it. We have the capabilities, but we're just not doing it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Maybe further on, in means of a community consensus, I would expect the outline of consent if it's meant in the more or less social way, will change over time. So this is gonna be interesting as well, and even focus a bit more on the documentation style. Like if you go for a carbon exposition in the, let's say, 50th last century, it was a complete different consensus
Yeah.
and means of how to deal with our environment as we nowadays luckily have.
Yeah. Yeah, most certainly. And again, you're going outside the reach of the algorithm. You're going into the way that we use blockchain in different workflows.
Yes, sorry about that one.
Well, no, I mean, that's the logical conclusion. I mean, if we're going into a workflow, then we need to talk about the consensus algorithm. Is it appropriate for the workflow we're working in? But I mean, that's a lot of the reason why people are ignoring consensus, because it's difficult. It's the hard stuff that has to be done. I mean, if you're not using the proper consensus, everything will work right up until the point that it doesn't. And when it doesn't, it's going to fail dramatically, right? It works. Oh, okay. This will be fun. Let's watch. But we digress. I mean, it's important the way that we understand consensus. It's important the way that we start talking about the social, right? The social implications. And it's not just the implications. It's not just the implications. I'm still not saying that right. I know. But it's the construct that we have. There's a very good book out there. It's called The Truth Machine, Michael Bogna and James Casey. And in the preface, it's probably the best book about social proof, about social construct, and this thing called your social value, and how blockchain can have someone who has little social proof, and how we can take him and put him into a situation immediately where he does have social proof. There's a construct for him. We build this digitally, and they move in. Where if someone is moving to a neighborhood, the intro to The Truth Machine talks about a refugee camp in Syria. And I believe the refugee camp was Azraq, and I believe there was about 35,000 people there. And the WHO was trying to combat a lot of things in this refugee camp. And refugee camps have a lot of issues. And the problem is, if you take a lot of food and put it in there, then gangs erupt. The gangs steal the food and then go out into the communities and sell the food in the community and compete with the farmers and blow out the local economies. So they're very reticent to do that. And if they dump a lot of money into that, the same thing happens. You've got a bunch of gangs and stuff that erupt inside of the refugee camps. It's a very difficult situation to work with. And they decided to employ blockchain. The moment they employ blockchain in Azra, things change, and they change dramatically. And the WHO has been working on distributed ledger workflows ever since. The reason it changed is they had a $65 device that was a retina scan. And the retina scan when the refugee would come in with his family, they would scan the refugee's eye, and that refugee then would have a place on the blockchain. The WHO could then allocate rice, allocate flour, allocate the right amount of foodstuffs for that person and his family. And the WHO didn't have to necessarily provide that. They just had to make sure that they had transportation for the local businesses, because they contracted with the local businesses who were on the other side of that blockchain and could transact someone with an eye scan. They would walk into the person's shop outside of Azra and say, look, I need flour, scan the eye, All right, you have 2 sacks of flour you can get. Do you want both of them or you don't want one of them? Give me both of them. Here's your 2 sacks of flour. And then that contract, that smart contract, was settled with the WHO and the local shop owner just outside of Basra. So in this point, we have the social construct that is developed digitally and is very difficult to game. And it gives you that social credit, that social, who you are socially, your social identity, and allows you goods, services, and basically to exist. I mean, people that don't have access to digital today don't exist in a digital world, and that's becoming the only world that we have that we can get together in anymore. It's a big thing. It's a big thing. I know I went on a tirade, but I think the truth machine is something that is important enough to talk about 4 or 5 times.
Correct,
Absolutely.
correct, and
Cool
correct. And
example.
sorry, go ahead, Professor Johannes.
I would just say really cool example in these memes. I've heard of this. Unfortunately, I didn't read it. I will.
Right. And blockchain, as you see, as illustrated by our subject matter expert, is in this case used for the common good. Using blockchain to identify, share, and to identify their place in the blockchain. These refugees. For those of you who are just coming to listen to our show today, it's the International Council of Registered Blockchain Professionals. And our topic for today is consensus mechanism is a sine qua non by our subject matter expert, Michael Noel. Mike, in your article written in LinkedIn, uh, you made mention about scalability and usability issues. Would you like to clarify those statements you made in your article so that our student can understand what are those concepts in relation to consensus and to the blockchain?
Yeah. 2017, everyone was saying there's no workflows for blockchain. Nothing's going to ever do with blockchain. There's nothing, you can't do anything with blockchain. So we started 37 companies in 2 weeks, each with a different workflow in blockchain. Interesting. It gave us a different perspective from things and the way things work and the way things can all come together. That article was written so long ago. I'm trying to remember what I wrote in it, to be quite honest with you. I know I wrote about consensus, and I know you're talking about scalability, but I'm going to attack this, I think, from a different perspective, if you don't mind, and go back to the basics. Because when you're talking about blockchain and you're talking about the actual workflows and integrating the workflows, consensus becomes very important, and it's something that you have to look for when you're building out these workflows. And basically, blockchain is the truth machine. It transfers truth, right? You have Bitcoin is the internet of value. And then Ethereum became the internet of truth. We could transfer truth one place to another using a smart contract. So it became more or less the truth machine. And if you wanted to inject truth in workflows, you had to disintermediate, which is what everyone is going through right now, the painfulness of disintermediation. But when I looked at workflows, I said, look, you've got to have 4 things, right? You've got to have a transfer of something, right? You have a transfer of truth is what I called it. But that was the first thing you needed to have. If you don't have a transfer of truth in the workflow, then there's no reason to interject blockchain. You have to have sticky bits. What are sticky bits? The sticky bits are things like it's basically all the interference, and it's the Swift network, for instance, takes 3 days to clear a transaction. It is a Visa, MasterCard. It's the gateway. It's the people that own the website. It's all of this different kind of stuff that gets in the way of doing things, right? Procedure, the list of regulations and that kind of stuff. There's a place for regulation, and the regulators don't know their place, but I'm sure we'll get there. We don't need to regulate a smart contract that self-executes. We just need to make sure that the regulations are in place when we build that smart contract so that it follows the regulations and does the right things. But so you've got this kind of this centerpiece where you're looking at it and you're looking at the workflow and you're looking for, is there sticky bits? Is there people that want to stand in the way of the transaction? Is there people that hoard the properties or try to build bonding curves within the platform? All these kinds of things are sticky bits. So we need to identify the sticky bits because we can eliminate all that, and that becomes our value proposition. So first of all, is there transfer of truth? Second of all, are there sticky bits? The third thing is there money in the transaction? Because if there's not money in the transaction, there's really no reason to move forward. But if there is money in the transaction, then you have a good sketch that you can sit down to a workflow and begin to disintermediate that workflow and get it as close to peer-to-peer as possible. And if you have these three things, then it becomes valuable. Your point to scalability. There might have been a fourth point. I can't remember. It's been quite some time, but that's the basic infrastructure. Scalability comes in with velocity, and velocity is important moving into these digital platforms. We're moving into zero marginal cost goods and services. And what is a appropriate markup on zero marginal cost? So we're getting into velocity, and we're going to enter in velocity very quickly, moving into the new paradigm. And my point is, if it's not scalable, don't do it. I mean, if you're not working, if the solution you come up with is not scalable, there's no value in it, move on. All of these solutions are going to have to be scalable to the nth degree, and all of them are going to have to take advantage of velocity. And velocity is where you had a marketplace that had 100 units a month before, and you made $10 a unit. You're going to have to do $1,000 a month and make 10 cents a unit. So, but you end up making less, but there's more provided, and there's more value in the platform. It's becoming more about building value in your platform, in your metaverse platform, whatever it is that you're working on, or you're trying to integrate the digital into the real world, which is metaverse. Whatever that is, build that as a platform and put the value in that. Make sure that you have transactions where there is trust, of transfer of trust. Make sure that there are sticky bits, because if there's sticky bits in the current transaction, that means that it's a good opportunity for you. Make sure that there is money in the transaction, and make sure that the solutions that you build are scalable, because if they're not scalable, taking advantage of velocity is going to be impossible. Does it make sense?
Yes, it is. Thank you so much for clarifying the issues of scalability and usability in the blockchain space. Now, going forward, I have some questions that I would like you to give your opinion about interplanetary file system. We know that IPFS is used heavily in the NFT industry, non-fungible token. So, how do you see it in a lens of consensus mechanism?
It's important. So hang on. Do you have a website that you pay for?
We do plenty. Yes.
Okay. And you pay for that like every month, right?
Right.
And you pay GoDaddy $8 a year for the DNS to have them point your DNS, right?
Right. Actually, about $12.50 now. They increased.
What happens when you don't pay that?
it's gone. That's it. You lose your control.
So now we have an immutable, unhackable way of keeping records that it really doesn't matter, because if we don't pay Bob Parsons, then he's not going to give us access to the world, right?
It stays there, right? So some people
It
see
stays there, but no, if Bob Parsons decides we're not going to give you, we're going to change the DNS, we're going to give that domain to someone else, right? What happens to your domain? It goes away. And now we have immutable records. We have transactions and smart contracts that depend upon someone clicking a box on a HTML file somewhere. You know what I mean? Somewhere, someone has to give authorization or something of that nature in the workflow. And now we've got a box that we have to tick that's HTML, that if we don't give Bob Parsons $12 a year, our pervasive and our never hackable smart contract that we just built isn't going to work, because Bob's going to shut down one point in the smart contract, and it's never going to function after that. I mean, we need to get to a point where we have pervasive DNS, and a DNS is not controlled by someone who has a dog in the hunt, right?
correct. Professor Johannes, do you have any take on the IPFS topic?
Yeah, let's say it's another really cool tool. Apart from storing things forever, even if it's not in the content storage, it's at least storing the file name forever. And the file name is a hash of a specific binary data blob, however big and however it's looking like. So it even can happen that a file isn't stored anywhere anymore, but you can upload it again under the same file name, which is a consensus again, like what a shard of a blob is. So this is really something in parallel. Not the same, but can be seen as a parallel of a blockchain in these means, because there's a consensus, even let's say wide accepted consensus of truths in these means. I've seen this hash as file name on the IPFS, and I can upload the same file again and will end up with the same file name. So this obviously has to be the same. Should have been the same. We don't know how far this will reach into the future in means of quantum computing or quantum supremacy, because we can have collisions on hashes, but with a little bit more of information about what this should be, like the same file size, or another information about what the content of this binary blob has to be. This can as well act as a universal, maybe a bit too much, but a general detail of truth, what happened.
Yeah, and in addition to that, because IPFS is pervasive, so now we have pervasive DNS, right? And because it's flexible, we can use that hash. Instead of storing a hash, we can store data. But we don't necessarily have to store the data on IPFS. We can further obfuscate the data streams by recording that data on a blockchain somewhere. Record it on Ethereum, record it on Solana, record it across several blockchains, right? But only store the location of that data in IPFS. So now we have a pervasive IPFS that tells us where all the data is, and we can institute another key in there to where only the second key holder could have the information on where that's at. And you've got completely secure data sets.
It's really interesting in these means, especially in going hand by hand. It's not in all, let's say, approaches too easy because we will see an hand-egg issue.
Yeah,
It means
well,
of where to store what and
yeah,
where to get the hash from. Because if I want to roll out, for example, an NFT with an IPFS hash and store it again into the IPFS, I'll
and you
land
should.
or end up with a different file name. So I would say there's some really good ways to interact between, because if
Yep.
both tools are used in the right way, they can really span up, let's say, a multidimensional system of how things can work out. But in a single line, like the blockchain itself or the IPFS itself, you have these hand-egg issues in a too restricting way sometimes for ideas to bring out in the society, to get into the society again, because basically all technology needs to find its, let's say, implementation somewhere in the society. Otherwise, it's just an academical game, let's say, and even time
Yeah,
limit.
whew. Yeah, there's so much there. So much there. I mean, so much of this we're working on for like the fifth time. I mean, 2017, 2016, I sat down with David Chaum and told him what I was doing, and he'd been doing the same things and told me about another guy that did that before him. So, I mean, we're all working on the same thing, trying to get to the finish line. And a lot of times it just doesn't seem like we're making much progress at all. I think that the IPFS, right, gives us DNS that is persistent. And I think that is a key to a lot of the different workflows out there, is persistent DNS.
Yeah,
But
especially in
I don't think that expecting the end user to understand an alternative DNS is where it's at. I think the real opportunity is when we integrate these technologies like distributed ledger technology for commerce, in-game commerce, in metaverse commerce, proof of location, all these different types of technologies. And we integrate them all into a single unit that works seamlessly, so that when the user, we get a user and the user shows up at our facility, they basically punch into our network or log into the app, and then we use AI to guide them through their experience on the medical campus that we're at, or on the hike that we're at, or in the national park experience that we're at, or in the automotive industry buying, any place that there's a lot of friction. I mean, the worst friction is in buying a phone. It seems like going into, some of these modular cell phone stores. Another one, the workflow is really bad, is the automotive industry going in and buying a car. No one likes these experiences. These should be the first experiences that we build in the metaverses. The metaverses are going to have to integrate all these different technologies, including IPFS, but the end user should not know they're using IPFS. They should just be going, oh, it's so much easier. We need to get there, obviously.
Yeah, precisely that one. Like with many technology, the user does not need to understand. It starts with your car. Maybe you can understand that you can fill in some water or oils or something, or even fuel. But the operating of complex machines doesn't need to be widely known, especially for each end user. And this is getting more complicated with smartphones, for example, like how to even understand the color system your display does, or the GPS, how that functions,
Yeah, but I mean,
and so on.
how much of this do we need? I mean, how much of this is just hyperbole about the color and the spectrum of sprinkles they can sprinkle? It's fairy dust at this point. I mean, cell phones should be a brick that becomes a commodity that I can buy for $30. And I should be able to access bandwidth for $1 a gig, right? Anywhere, face of the planet. Next,
Yep.
moving on.
Absolutely. I would say, as a very technical guy, it's not bad to understand a few details of techniques
Oh, no.
you use. Like with a
But-
car, it's good to know that you put oil into it, at least once in a while. So
That's a great point. You're absolutely right on that. But I'm still going to say that, at night when I go home and at 6 o'clock, I want to watch the news, I reach for that Roku remote. And I don't necessarily have to understand if that's radio waves or if there's sound waves or how that all works. I just press the buttons and it all works. This is that the metaverse should be a Roku remote. Here you go. Boom.
absolutely.
The end user should look at it and go, "Oh, I know how to use it."
Yeah, this is how things really should be. Not completely forgotten about important details. Like even with consensus or something like that,
Yeah.
there has to be somewhere an understanding that there is something like that. It's not really important that the full details of that should be. For example,
somewhere there was a conversation. Somewhere there was a conversation with a developer, and the developer went, "Well, what's consensus?" And they said, "Well, it's the most important thing, and it's the structure, and it truly makes everything truthful." And they went, "We don't need that. We don't need any."
Well, that's nice. So, for example, for the radio control,
Where we're at.
If it's an infrared radio control, the user will understand when a person stands behind the TV and the remote control, it won't work. So a little bit of technical knowledge is needed.
Yeah, there you go.
Probably
there you
confused.
go.
Yeah.
But you do understand my point.
The right way. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. There's a right way and a wrong way. And my point is, it's not up to the end user to understand our technology. It's up to us to develop the technology that we can deliver to the end user in a way that's seamless and is usable.
Yeah, great point. Again, the usable, because we are in a very new technology, and these means we're talking about specifically. We need the users to really name what they mean or want, or what they need, or what they think it should be acceptable. And this is the let's say mass adoption, something like that. So it has to be sound in even these social memes as the best, let's say, a mathematical consensus. Won't really work practically if people don't understand and don't, let's say, accept it as, okay, this is no magic and no just random Kelvin balls or whatever. But they have an idea of that to really trust it.
Yeah, no one trusts it right now because of all the gaming that's
Right. I
what
think,
is it? Bob Moses is a group out of LA. They're EDM, and Bob Moses. They're one of my favorite groups. I really like Bob Moses, and one of their recent songs and one of the verses, it doesn't really matter what the proof is when everyone is getting ruthless, right? I mean,
that's great.
It doesn't matter. This is an EDM. I mean, we have hit the heart and soul of the new generation in what we're doing, and they've looked at us and said, "No, everyone's being ruthless." So they're seeing a lot of the superficial stuff, and they're not seeing the blockchain stuff that's really going to help and really going to. It's a mess out there. It really is. It's horrible. Sorry, guys.
Right,
It's
right.
okay.
Yeah, I
It's
want to be
good.
I want to be a blockchain guy. I want to learn blockchain. Yeah, okay. Well, here's what it is. It's horrible, dude. It's horrible.
Oh, don't discourage our student, Mike, because our student they're building their future and they're looking up you guys as the pioneer in the blockchain space. And I totally get what you said that users, common users, don't need to learn the back end of the blockchain technology. And when you go back, you go home and watch TV, you don't have to learn about the radio waves and all. But also, as we already highlighted in our interview, they have to learn, they have to know the idea that the bedrock of DLT, distributed ledger technology, consensus mechanism, is very important. The gist of it, the principle behind it. That's why blockchain technology works. Um, so thank you so much, guys, for this wonderful discussion today. Mike, you are always, a great source of conversation and a great source of learning in the blockchain space. And the International Council of Registered Blockchain Professional is honored to have you today and in the future. Also, Professor Johannes, Dowe. But by the way, initially, Michael Noel, soon to become a professor, hopefully in Althash University, we are planning to develop a course on metaverse. Isn't it true, Mike?
Sure.
Yes. So we will be.
Well, hang on. What's the metaverse? Now you're opening up. We're in consensus. Now we're opening up the whole thing about the metaverse, which is, I mean, that. Do you know what a metaverse is? Because I don't think very many people do.
Right. That's why we're offering the course, and definitely Mike Noel is one of our invited faculty member, and we will start developing the curriculum soon. But before we end, let me plug in our sponsor for today.
This blockchain continuing education program is brought to you by our major sponsors: HTMLCoin, utility coin beyond the hype; Althash University, your online school in the fourth industrial revolution; Libra Codes, take control on your NFT creation; and Credence Hub, verified credentials, anytime, anywhere. We also would like to thank our partners.
We are back right now at the International Council of Registered Blockchain Professional, and Michael Noel, our subject matter expert for today's show. Mike, before we go, do you have any project that you're currently working that you would like to invite our viewers and our student, and also followed by Professor Johannes?
I'll always take an opportunity for a shameless plug. I mean, I think the biggest opportunity that mankind has ever seen is this new thing called the metaverse. The metaverse is not a network like it. You don't access the metaverse like your father accessed MySpace. It's completely different. It's a network of hubs. It's a network of opportunities. It's a platform that has value. And start getting your arms around what that means and what that means to you. Start getting your arms around what that means to you locally. And I don't care where you're at. If you're in Africa, if you're in China, if you're in Russia, if you're in Uganda, it doesn't matter. There's opportunities there locally where you can begin to look at problems and solve problems using blockchain. Most probably the larger ones are going to be a metaverse. And this is a new workflow that works 1,000 times quicker and 100 times less expensive. And the place that it's really going to take hold is in the rural environments, not the big cities. This is taking hold in the rural environment. So this is an opportunity for everyone that is anywhere to really grab a hold. And if you're at Althash University and you're taking these courses, you're getting a head shaping that's a little different than most of the guys out there. So that's going to give you a big leg up in your implementation and change your outcomes to more positive.
Thank you so much, Mike, for that wonderful, an inspirational statement for our viewers, our professionals here in ICORBP, and our student learning at Althash University. And Professor Johannes, though, any statement on the blockchain studies program?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really proud of being there. And as Michael just mentioned, that's apart from the just technical layout, it's really cool to make a real use of the internet, giving a worldwide computer system something above to really use, like working with so many people from all around the world and so many different time zones, with so many different insights to really make the world a global village. And I hope this will extend a bit more to make a little add the Althash ecosystem, which is especially meant to do so, like having many different projects there and doing things together, where I see in many blockchain projects is just the one and only. And I think the ICORBP, Althash University, and so could do things better than many others and making this more open to have more people cooperate and really make a sense out of the worldwide computer, the interplanetary file system, to drive it further in the real use. Oh, okay, so much about the ad about that one. But I think I like this vision.
Right, but you also have an incoming defense for the capstone for the student. Would you like highlighting those capstone defense so that incoming student will know what you guys are doing at the Althash University, especially in the blockchain studies program, before we turn off the light?
Yeah, I don't want to leak ideas of students in general, especially this record will be on the net forever. So come to the Althash University, take our courses.
Okay.
And many ideas hopefully welcome.
Okay, thank you so much, guys, for this wonderful show today. Mike, again,
My pleasure.
we're looking forward to have you again next and to be as our invited faculty member at Althash University. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye now.
Yeah, bye-bye. Great talking. Thank you so much.